Hi, my name is Lee J, and welcome to this podcast, Chatting with Lee. Each week, we get the chance to chat with somebody, and here's who I've been chatting with this time. Ladies and gentlemen, very pleased, very privileged to have on the end of the phone from Conwy, I guess, in Wales, Drew Pritchard. Drew, are you well?
Hello, mate. I'm very well, thank you, Lee. Nice to talk to you finally.
It's great. Now, I'm going to take you back. Your passion for antiques, is that as a result of your dad and growing up with sort of him restoring cars and motorbikes and things like that?
I think so, yes. I've never really known anything else. I was brought up, with a motorbike with its wheels off on the kitchen table, through to old pub signs being restored, gilded, showmen turning up with their vans to be sign written, and my father's friends all turning up in lovely old cars and motorbikes. And this is when it went a period when they weren't really worth anything. So it was more passion driven. This was the 70s, 1970s and early 80s. And our next door neighbour had an Aston Martin DB4 that he paid £75 for. So you can imagine what, it was a different time, and I was very privileged to grow up in that. But it was very sort of rough and ready, very rural. And I loved it. It just grasped me from a very young age. And by the time I was 8, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And by the time I was 11, I was actually buying and selling things.
How did you get involved in restoring stained glass windows? Because that's a very specialised thing.
Yeah, well, how it worked was, if you wanted to get into the antiques trade in the 1980s, right, there was so much money involved in that business in the time, huge amount of import and export, particularly to America, that the dealers who were involved were very guarded about everything. They didn't want anybody with a brain. Now, I tried to get into an antique dealer, to work for an antique dealer, and nobody would take me. So I got a job with a friend of my father's, Gordon, who ran a stained glass workshop, a proper one, not a little sort of crafty one. I mean, a proper one. We were doing, huge church window commissions and restorations and things like that. Yeah. And I got the job because I looked like I could lift a box of lead. But what I did know, I know, it's crazy, isn't it? And I did realise that it would be a backdoor way into the antiques business. And on the first day I arrived there as a snotty 16-year-old, this van pulled up and it said Michael Main Architectural Antiques down the side. He opened the back door, shouted, "Hey boy, come here." And I looked in the back of this van, and there was this amazing front door with all these stained glass windows with butterflies flying all over them, and fireplace parts and door furniture lying all over the floor of this van. And I just thought, that's it, I'm in. It was like a switch. It was a switch going on in my head. I was like, that's it. This is where I want to be. This is where I wanted to be for years. And I've never looked back. And that was 34 years ago.
I've got a story here, which I don't know whether it's true, that your gift, basically for spotting diamonds in the rough, really came into its own when you discovered some William Morris stained glass windows, bought them and restored them and made a decent profit on it.
Made an absolute fortune on them. It was a lot of work, and it was a strange story. I've actually written my autobiography, which was meant to be coming out in 10 days, but now it's not because of what's going on in the world. They're holding it back until next February. And I talk about this in detail, but basically, on the first week of doing this stained glass work, so I've had the miraculous meeting with the architectural antique dealer, and then a few days later, we went to this church in Holyhead in North Wales to take all these stained glass windows out because the building was being pulled down and the demolition contractor wanted to keep them. So we took all these windows out, and I didn't think anything of it, and put them in the back of his car, and he drove off, and that was the end of that. So that was 1986. 1993, 94 comes round. I've been made redundant, started up my own business, and I'm working from the pit below a truck garage that my father used to use to signwrite all the wagons in. Goodness. And there was a room underneath that. It was like the office, and you could see underneath the trucks sort of thing. So I was in there. This van pulls up, and it was a dealer guy I knew a little bit called Steve, and he goes, "I've got some stained glass windows." He rang me and said, "I'm going to come and bring you some windows." And I opened the back of the van, and lo and behold, there the windows I took out when I was 16 in 1986 are lying in the back of this guy's van. And I said, "Where'd you get these?" And he said, "Oh, I did a house clearance. The guy has died. He used to be a demolition contractor on Anglesey." I was like, well, bloody hell, I couldn't believe it, pardon my French. But I looked at them, and as I peeled the first one back, that my trainee Darren behind me literally went like that with the surprise, because we could see it was a William Morris window. It was actually Morris and Co. So it was actually designed by William Morris and Burne-Jones, but made after his death. And then I said to the guy, well, what do you want for the lot? And he said, $4,000. And I think I had like 3,003 I could sort of get together. And he said, yeah, go on then, you owe me a favour. And that's that. And I bought them all.
Wow. And that set you up in business and started the whole thing going, I guess.
It did. I must admit, by the time we'd sold all of it, because there was windows there not only from William Morris, but also by Shriggy and Hunt and by various other great luminaries of the stained glass world in the 19th century and early 20th century. It was like a pile of all the greats. And by the time we'd sold the last one, it was somewhere between 123 and 128,000 pounds we'd sold them for.
I've spoken to a couple of people who were involved in antiques, and not so long ago I chatted with Adam Partridge, and I want to see if you feel the same way. Is it true that it's not so much the education or the learning, if you like, it's the passion that gets you through antiques?
Yeah, the passion is everything. Unfortunately, with Adam he's an auctioneer, really, so they don't really. Adam doesn't really have the knowledge, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not a fan. Not a fan of him at all. At all. Unfortunately, it is a passion that, to be perfectly honest, the first thing when I'm waking up in the morning on my phone and on Instagram to see if there's anything new I can buy has popped up. You know, it's an utter passion. I'm actually on the phone to you now. I'm in front of my computer screen and I'm looking at an antique dealer's stock in New York at the moment, looking at a couple of the tables he's got. So it's an overawing. And do you know what? It doesn't get any less.
Yeah.
It just goes deeper. The more you know, the deeper you go into it, and it gets into you. And knowledge is very powerful. And I left school at 15 and a half with no qualifications whatsoever, with undiagnosed dyslexia as well.
Oh, cool.
But I read myself into a job, if you know what I mean. I just read and read and read. From about 11, I read voraciously any antique book I could get my hands on. My parents had a Lyell's Antiques book, 1980 something, and I just read that cover to cover, and then I put it down and pick it up and start again at the front, and I'd read them, you know, and I knew what pages items were on, and I'd go back and stare at these things in wonder. And I remember I did my homework. You know, a friend of mine described me as over-educated. So I've no formal education. I've got a driver's license. That's the only test I've ever passed. I sort of just had such a deep passion for what I do, and still do. And you know, I've been reading about it now for 40 years.
Goodness.
Immersed in it for 30 odd of those, and I know 1%. It's a massive subject.
Yeah. When we see you on Salvage Hunters on TV, it seems to me as though every deal that you do is based on passion. You want it, you need it, you've got to have it, but still obviously within a price range. But do you have the thrill of the chase?
It's the whole thing, to be perfectly honest with you. For me, hearing about something and then getting in the car immediately and running off to see it was, I used to hear about an old car in a barn somewhere, and I just literally jump on my push bike and cycle to find it on a hearsay, you know. And it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed now. But now, if I walk into a room, I recently on Salvage Hunters walked into an antique centre in Stroud, and I was in there 4 minutes, and I walked upstairs, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was the most wonderful card table, by Crace, and it had been there for months, and nobody saw it. And this was, you know, a fabulous piece of architect-designed, beautifully constructed furniture, and and I was able to buy it for £320. The thing was worth, well, you could add a zero, basically, which is what we did after some restoration. And we sold it for $2,800 in the end, once conserved and a new liner put on it. The excitement of seeing something and joining the dots and going, I know what that is. I know what it's worth. I know who it's by. I know why it was made. I know what period it was made in. I know all of these different things, and the excitement of that knowledge flooding out of you into this one piece when you see something is really, God, it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's really exciting. I can't tell you. It's amazing.
Salvage Hunters started, I think, in 2011. You're now in Series 14?
Series 14 now. I was filming the year prior to it coming out, obviously, to make the programme.
Yeah.
So I've been filming now for 10 years and 1 month, basically, is what we've been filming for. We've just been filming that whole time relentlessly, to be honest with you. It's all coming out in the book, all the reality, because I didn't want to be on TV. I had no interest on being on TV. We did it for a laugh, to be perfectly honest with you. We thought it would be a giggle and easy. And on day one, I pretty much hijacked the whole process, because they said, right, what we want you to do is this horrible little director they put me with, sat me in the back. I was driving my old estate car and he was in the back, and we were driving along. He says, right, what you're going to do is we're going to go to this old lady's house and you're going to rip her off, and then we're going to film her. And I said, no, we don't do that. That's not how I do it. And he said, you have to do it. You're on contract. I said, I'm on contract, but I don't have to do anything. And I stopped the car and threw him out of the car. And from that moment on, I very much did on Salvage Hunters what I want to do, which is be me, whether you like it or not. This is the real deal. This is what you get. And that's the sort of, I'm very glad, extremely glad, actually, I'd made that decision.
Well, whilst we see the fun between you and T and the rest of the team, I'm going to talk about T in a minute. There is very much a positive thing that this whole thing is driven by you. And I think that's great. And I'm sure that's why it is so popular.
It is. It's taken, I always say we're a 10-year overnight success. We've been doing the same thing from day one. I hate all that BS TV and people lying and false Jeopardy and all that. I don't want to watch that. But 10 years ago when I started doing it, people did watch that and they did like that. But I didn't. And I just wanted to, I thought, well, if I'm going to have a go at this, if I'm only going to do it once, I'm going to do it on my terms, because I don't have to please these people. I'm not bothered about not being on TV if they don't want to do it again. So I just did my thing without a care in the world. And this wonderful man who's now one of my best friends in the world, called Simon Jolly, is our sound man. And about 2 weeks into this, and road crews aren't allowed to say anything to you. They're not allowed to have an opinion, right?
Right.
It's very strict. And the directors, they got another director in, and I wouldn't do anything I was told. I said, look, we're going to do it this way. And he's like, oh, we can't. I said, well, you don't do it then. And I was being very bolshy about it, because I wanted to make sure I got the real me across. Wasn't interested in what they had to say. And my sound man, Simon, he just elbowed me in the back and said, mate, keep doing this. This is really good.
Yeah.
And that was a point, and I thought, yeah, I like this guy. I trust him. So I just carried on regardless doing it. And Simon then from that day to this, Simon has been my only sound man, and he's actually moved to Wales now and retrained as a French polisher. No. And he does some work for me. He does some work for me when we're not doing recording.
Oh, brilliant!
And become one of my best friends. So it was very much a gut reaction to do what we did, and I'm extremely happy. It's probably the best decision I made, I should imagine.
Now, the other thing that is great about it is T. I mean, T is a character in his own right. The sort of, it seems a natural repartee between the two of you. It doesn't seem scripted or anything like that. I don't know whether it is. If it is, it's done blooming well.
We've never had a script, and if you gave us one, we'd bin it. We're not interested. T, everything you see is what you get. I met T in 1978 in the bus stop near my house. He had a rally chopper. I had one. My mates were talking to him. He just moved into the village. And he was called Teabag then. His nickname was Teabag. That's where tea comes from. And we've been mates ever since. So that's, 42 years. We've been friends. He's not changed at all. He is way funnier in real life than you see on TV. It's hilarious. Absolutely lazy. Very clever. He's actually a lighting and sound technician for people like that. That's his training. He trained as a lighting and sound technician, and ended up working on things like the Russian National Ballet and working for productions like that, right through to Glastonbury and Hay Festival. So he did all of that. And then I sort of pinched him to come and work with me on Salvage Hunters. But he'd worked for me on and off in the past for 20 years. Helping me. I'd ring him when he was not got a contract. He'd come and work with me, driving the van or packing stuff or helping me strip out buildings and that type of thing. So he's been in and around what I do for 40 years.
Now, the other thing which I know is a big passion of yours is cars. And if I've got this right, you got your first car when you were 15 and restored it. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. I got the first car, 1968 Morris Minor two-door, NTF 654G. I know I can remember all sorts of rubbish like that. And spent 2 years restoring it, and then 6 weeks later I wrote it off.
Oh no!
Yeah, with tea in the passenger seat, and I've got a photograph of both of us stood next to this crumpled car, which was nothing left of it really. We rolled it, driving like a 17-year-old boy does,
As you do in Morris Minors.
On wet roads with cross-ply tyres, trying to race some lads in a Chevette.
Oh dear.
And that was the end of that, really. But I started buying and selling cars and car parts when I was about 15. My passion from cars comes from my father and his friends. But I realised I bought a four-door Morris Minor, extremely rusty, from some lady in the village, and I pushed it home with tea and a load of others. We pushed it and put it in the yard that my parents had around the back of the house. Mm-hmm. My dad signed writing the trucks and the vans. And the local doctor came to me a month or so later and said, "What are you doing with that Morris Minor?" I said, "I'm not sure." He said, "Well, can I buy the interior light cover? Can I buy a hubcap, and can I buy one of the headlamps?" So I paid 55 quid for this car. And he said, "Well, how much are they?" And I said, 55 quid. So he gave me 55 quid for that. So I've got a car for free. So then I went on from there. And by the time I was sort of 16, 17, I had about 12 cars down in the backyard of my parents' yard, which we would literally go and, get a friend who's got a driving license to drive them back for me. And then I'd break them for spares or sell them on as they were, wash them and selling. I just had a natural gift for selling things, for sure. And then the council this council guy turned up at my mum's doorstep while I was still in school. So I must have been about 15 and a half and somewhere around there. It's all a bit mixed up, and said, "Your son's running a scrapyard." and she said, "No, he's not." And sent him off with a flea in his ear. Well, I got back from school and that was it. So she was like, "Right, all those cars gone now, get rid." So that my scrap dealer days were over, because I'd very happily own a scrapyard. Very happily own a scrapyard. I love old scrap. I used to break into the local scrapyard in Llandudno Junction after they'd closed when I was a kid. When I was about 12 and 13, I'd jump over the fence just to wander around in all the old cars looking at stuff with no knowledge of what I was really looking at, really. Just the love of being around old grotty things. I just really like it. Isn't it? What an odd kid.
Sounds fantastic. Is it true that if you hadn't have been a dealer, restorer, antique person, you'd have been a racing driver?
That would be the dream, yes. A few years ago, I actually managed to achieve a lifelong goal, and I got my full National A racing driver's license. And since then, I've raced at the Donington Historic Festival at Silverstone, and I also raced I couldn't believe it, at the Goodwood Revival. I actually raced my historic VW Beetle at the Goodwood Revival 2 years ago, which was just with my son there. So it's the first time one of those cars has been round Goodwood since the late 50s, and I'm the first one back there because I have a huge passion for old VWs. Yeah, and I had to have my son with me. Was rather special. Yeah, but racing cars for me is, like Steve McQueen said, racing is life. Everything else is just waiting. It's very much how I feel. It's my passion for racing cars is huge. And if Discovery would let me, I'd be racing classic motorbikes by now as well, but they won't let me do that because it's very dangerous.
Yes, I ride a motorbike. I know exactly what you mean. Listen, what does the future hold for Drew Pritchard now? I mean, you've got the shop.
I don't know. I'm a bit of a one-trick pony. I'm very good at what I do, but that's about it, really. You know, my skill base is minimal. People say to me, they said, "Oh, you've got a good eye," and I always say, "Yeah, but that's all I've got." You know, and it's what do I do with that next? You know, so
yeah,
I'm carrying on doing more TV because I really enjoy it, and the lads who I film with. The same group of lads have been with me for about 7-8 years, and I said Simon for 10, coming on for 11 with Simon, the sound man.
Yeah. And
it's become a real family, you know, and we've realised that people all over the world really love Salvage Hunters, and I'm continually surprised why two fat lads in a van would be of any interest to anybody, but we are. And it's you know, it's a real... You know, that is a real pleasure in your life to know that somebody enjoys to see what you're doing. Is really, really good. It makes you feel very good about yourself and makes it all the hard work. And I must say, filming is hard work. Makes it worth it, because I do over 80,000 miles a year just filming. So, you know, it's a lot. But what am I going to do next? I've got my shop. We're finishing off now, which is looking fantastic. And I've brought my mate David in to run that, who's just a brilliant salesman. So he's going to go in and going to run that baby for me. I've got another very good friend of mine, Neil, who's running my new warehouse there, where my cars and scooters are in there as well. And all the shipping and the international shipping is going to be in there. And I just want to race cars a bit more, buy some more old cars, buy some more. I love, one of my great passions is buying properties and restoring them as well. So that's another thing that I'm very, very keen on doing. It was going to be this year. It's going to be next year now for that.
Okay. The boring question that we always have to ask, if there is one, I know a lot of stuff doesn't actually go into the shop because occasionally some of it goes to Pritchard Towers, but is there one thing that you have bought that you would never, ever part with? Or is it all for sale?
It's a tricky one. I've got a very old, beaten to hell Rolex watch I bought when I was 23 for 700 quid, which I took off my wrist for the first time last year because it was getting a bit worn out. And my son turns 21 in June, so he may get that. That's something I'd never sell. Mm-hmm. As antiques go, antiques that I bought, I managed to buy, while filming Salvage Hunters, a large plaster cast relief done by Lord Elgin of the Elgin Marbles fame.
Oh, yes.
Of part of the Parthenon frieze.
Yes.
And it's probably, if I was to let everything else go, that would be the last piece. But I'm a dealer, and I would sell it.
Yeah,
I would sell it. I
Okay.
would sell it. But that's my favourite piece that I have. I have to. But I mean, there's things. I've got a note from my son. I've got my grandmother's engagement ring and that knackered old Rolex. And really, I don't really need anything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just stuff that I love, but I love it for a while and then let it go and let somebody else have it. And that's how I buy. I buy for myself. So I buy things that I would put in my own house. That's the trick, I think, to why that people buy so much of my stuff, is because they can see it in their houses as well. I think so. That's all I do. It's not very clever, really. It's just what I like doing.
Well, it works.
It's the passion that I have. I can't tell you. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I could, financially, I can't pack it in because I'm always buying something else and restoring something else and doing something else. So I'm always, stretching the finances all the time. I'll never retire. If you give me 50 million, I'd just go off buying art, If I had all the money in the world, I would travel the world buying paintings. I think art it stirs me more than most things.
Okay. Drew Pritchard, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. And I've discovered so many things about you I never knew. Next time I watch you on TV...
Well, there you go.
Next time I see you...
You can have that for nothing.
Right,
That's
thank you.
Yours. I'll say hello to tea for you, all right?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please. And if you ever decide to come down to this bit of Spain, as opposed to the other bit, let us know.
We've done the top end, so we are due to do the bottom end. So
right.
we will be in Spain. I can promise you that we will be down there for sure.
Excellent.
The foreign trips we absolutely love.
Yes.
We love it. All of us, the whole crew, we absolutely love it.
I'll treat you to a beer and a tapper.
Thank you, mate. All right, Lee. Well, that's a great pleasure in talking to you, and I hope that any of you guys listening, I hope you don't fall asleep during listening to it, but I hope you enjoy what we've got to say.
Thank you very much, mate. I'm sure we do. Take care now.
All right. Thank you, Lee. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. You can find links to more of my interviews on my Facebook page and on YouTube channel, Chatting with Lee.